Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Stone Age Gamer. Today's episode is called Sequelization. Enjoy!
Welcome back, everybody. We have returned. This is episode 3 of Stone Age Gamer Podcast. I am shaking things up a tad bit tonight. I'm your host, Mr. Chris Randazzo, and with me tonight is the only other person I know to graduate and get his doctorate from the same college as Dr. Mario, Dr. Dean DeFalco.
Oh, hey there.
Also with me tonight is my most hated of breakfast meats, Mr. Dan Ryan.
Good evening, sirs.
And joining us for the very first time this evening is, rounding out our quartet and bringing along a lovely singing voice, Mr. Mike Sheridan.
What's going on?
Gentlemen, tonight the topic before us is sequelization. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to talk about games that have vastly improved over their predecessors, like the never-ending debate, Mega Man 2 to Mega Man 3, that kind of stuff. And we've all prepared some individual games to talk about, and let's just jump right in. Everyone's doing okay, I take it? Feeling good?
Doing well, sir. Thank you for asking. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Dan. Anytime.
You're a good man.
Speaking of Dan, I guess let's start off with you. What game exemplifies going from previous to sequel? What brings home your sensations?
To me, the best example of this is the jump from Metal Gear to Metal Gear Solid, from the NES to the PlayStation 1. Now, I understand for purists out there that there is a sequel to Metal Gear made by Hideo Kojima called, I believe it's just that one is Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake.
Yeah.
Snake's Revenge, not made by Hideo Kojima, and a steaming pile of garbage. Made basically as a quick cash-in back in the day from Konami through the Ultra Games label to really to cash in on the success of the original Metal Gear. The original Metal Gear comes out in 1987 for the MSX in Japan, for the NES in the States, and it is absolutely a revolutionary game. It is probably, to a 7-year-old, 8-year-old me at the time, one of the coolest things I have absolutely ever seen or played. Just an amazing game. You've got Solid Snake, this super badass soldier, just dropped into the jungle with only his fists and nothing else, and then you start walking through these levels, and the translation dialogue is terrible, but that's part of its charm now. You have to wait for dudes to fall asleep, and it was like, I can't just run through this like I do with Mario. This is a brand new experience. I have to learn how to play this game in particular.
Don't you mean feel asleep, Dan? I feel asleep.
I feel asleep. I do. It really, in my mind, the coolest thing about the retro games, not retro then, but as we talk about them now, is that it was a new experience every time we played a game. Right, when I played Super Mario Brothers, it was a certain type of experience, and then when I played Metroid, all of a sudden I could walk to the other side of the screen, and I blew my mind. I have a whole new thing I have to learn. Same thing with Metal Gear, right? But then it takes until 1998 for Hideo Kojima to put out the game that basically defines, in my mind, the Sony PlayStation, the original PlayStation. That. And, you can make the argument Final Fantasy VII, I suppose. But for me, it's Metal Gear Solid, defines that system, and is why it won that generation. All of a sudden, you have this game that has stellar voice acting. I mean, we're not talking Resident Evil, Jill, you are the master of unlocking nonsense. We are talking absolutely stellar voice acting. A story that absolutely sucks you in. that gives you a choice of whether characters live or die, depending on if you're good enough at a certain section of the game. You know, we're talking about Meryl here. If you can save her or not, right? It gives you this kind of just, I'm trying to think of a way to say it without cursing, but the scene with Psycho Mantis, right? This mind warp that it gives you, I suppose, of playing the game, and Psycho Mantis tells me that he sees that I like Castlevania. I couldn't. It took me the longest time as a teenager to figure out how the hell
figure out that trick. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just. How does he know that I do love Castlevania? Psycho Mantis? Of course I do. It's a great. I just thought they were like, oh, it's a great game. Everybody must love this. We'll put it in here, right? But no, it's reading my memory card, and if I have certain games on there, Psycho Mantis is going to say something about it, and the fact that I had to use the other controller to beat Psycho Mantis. You know,
It was a very good example of thinking outside of the box, which is something that game did extraordinarily well. I guess for anybody not completely up to snuff on Metal Gear, because most people's first experience with Metal Gear is Metal Gear Solid. I remember working in a Funko Land when this game came out, and so many people buying it for PlayStation and having no idea that it was a sequel to an NES game. But the core mechanics of the stealth action stuff was what came from the original NES game. Well, the original NES game here in America was an MSX game in Japan.
Yeah, MSX, and then the sequel that Kojima did that came out in '90 was MSX2,
Gotcha.
which
yeah.
actually didn't even make it over to the States until the PlayStation 2. It was on. I think the Metal Gear Solid 3 Special Edition release had the MSX versions of Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 on it.
Yeah, those were I believe the first times they came over to America. Now, like, all right, so there's a lot of similarities obviously between Metal Gear and Metal Gear Solid. I mean, it's told from a top-down perspective. You're infiltrating base outer heaven, I believe. Isn't it still outer heaven in Metal Gear Solid? Or
I think you're right, Outer Heaven.
yeah,
Yeah.
so you're doing that. You're avoiding security cameras. You're avoiding being tracked down. It's even got the same little exclamation points. What exactly is it besides the leap in technology, which is the obvious one, because this is these aren't necessarily contemporaries because of how technologically more advanced
Certainly.
Solid is over Metal Gear. What is it that gameplay wise and experience wise that really ascended between Metal Gear and Metal Gear Solid?
Like, really, for me, it again, it goes back to those cool little tricks that Kojima put in there. The stuff with Psycho Mantis, the fact that one of the codes on the codec to call one of your team members is on the back of the game disc itself. On the back of the package is the only place where it says, what this code is. And again, it took me forever to figure that out, right? Because the internet was not the ubiquitous tool back in 1998, which doesn't seem all that long ago to me, certainly, but back then the internet was not as ubiquitous, certainly, as it is now. So I had to actually figure these things out. But between that and the character work that is in this game, the bosses, Revolver Ocelot is just so cool. Just Psycho Mantis is a character that you remember playing against. I remember what those boss fights were like. And I don't do that with a lot of games. I've played a lot of games since I got my first Nintendo, and I've, played through a bunch of them. And a lot of them I can't really remember, but the characters were so well defined in that versus the first one. The story was so much deeper that, to me, these characters are sort of on the same level as the characters in Punch-Out. If that makes any sense. I remember those fights in Punch-Out the same way that I remember these fights in Metal Gear Solid.
Well,
That's
I think that's the way it was supposed to be, because even in later iterations, which I won't get into, but they all have that very huge, worked up type of feel to it. There's always a small cutscene before, like, throwing you into the fight. It was great. Those are really awesome games. One of my favorite characters is from Metal Gear Solid, and that's Gray Fox. So yeah, I mean, that just goes to prove it.
All right.
It's just. No, Gray Fox, the scenes with Otacon are amazing. There's just such depth there. And I mean, like you said, ignoring the later games in the series, and it's one of my very favorite series. I am so excited for Metal Gear Solid 5 later this year.
And
I
go on, Dan.
cannot
I
wait.
didn't mean
But
to cut you off.
but it's those characters, they're just so perfect. Everything about that game. The story is ridiculous. It is an absolutely ridiculous story, but it's perfect and it's beautiful in the world that it exists in.
Agreed. Just before we go on to the next thing, real quick, did you guys happen to hear about the fan remake that Konami gave the okay for the original Metal Gear Solid being ported over to the Alien Swarm engine?
No.
No.
Yeah, check it out. I think it was on Kotaku. Might be on a few other things like Game Informer on their website. Definitely check it out. It's worth a look. They showed how I think one of the levels would look recreated, and I'm on board with this. Konami did give the okay for it as long as they're not selling it, and this is just strictly a fan remake. They're okay with it, so I'm really excited to see that when it's all done.
Yeah, man. I mean, your favorite character, Gray Fox, he came from the original Metal Gear, so that's pretty cool. All right,
Yeah,
well,
that would be awesome.
Moving on, Mike, what is your example of good to great?
Well, we've all played the Turtles games, but what I thought was an amazing jump was from Manhattan Project to Turtles in Time. Because everybody I know, if you talk about beat 'em ups, the major three come out. It's Final Fight, Streets of Rage, and Turtles in Time. My opinion, Turtles in Time top that list. But like when you're playing Manhattan Project, you're like every one of those games progressed from the crap start to Manhattan Project.
Yeah, the first Turtles on NES was a bad game.
Yeah.
No, that game is wonderful.
Everybody had it.
Shut your face.
Shut your dirty whore mouth.
But like when you're playing like all the games though, it feels like you're watching the show. Like, music behind it and all that, but you get to play as your favorite turtle. I see no fault in this. But with Manhattan Project, all you really need to do while you're fighting is just hit select. That's like your more or less annihilate everything like move. It just kills everything. That makes it easy mode. But with Turtles in Time, granted I had that game on farm constantly. Me and my buddy would just go right after school to his house and just beat it like 6 times in the span of like an hour and a half.
So are you referring to the Turtles in Time, the arcade Turtles in Time, or the Super NES version?
Super NES version.
Okay.
I wish I was talking about the arcade. That'd be great to have at my house.
That would be nice. Now, similar to Dan's situation, you've got a big leap in technology between your two games. So, is there something beyond just the technological facelift of Turtles 3 to Turtles 4? Because Turtles 3 was a late NES game. It was pretty good looking as far as NES games go,
Yeah.
but moving up to the Super NES, the music and the visuals of Turtles in Time are really some of personally my favorite things about the game. Just the way it looked so much like the cartoon, the intro looked so much like the cartoon, and the music and all the sound effects really had that great punch to them. Gameplay wise, was there a lot of, because I mean I have Turtles 3, I don't have a ton of experience with it myself. Is there a lot of gameplay evolution from 3 to 4?
From 3 to 4, there's not much lasting power on 3. Like Turtles 4, you remember all the fights. Turtles 3, it's good, but there's nothing amazing that really stuck to it.
Yeah, I remember being on a beach at some point, and I remember being in the snow at some point, and that's really all I remember from that one.
There's not much holding power to it in comparison. 4 just overpowers it completely. But like more what's the best way to put this? It was more to the show than the first game. we can definitely say that.
Well, yes.
I mean, there was no one killing you with a chainsaw.
The less we say, that's right. This weird chainsaw guys were running around. God, that game was bizarre. Good soundtrack though.
Yeah, but that was the best thing to it, the soundtrack.
Just a quick tidbit here, because I'm just going to keep throwing in useful things for people to get.
You are a doctor, after all.
I am a doctor, so I read things a lot. And I happened to read, actually, I downloaded this. On OC Remix, there is a redone album for, I believe it's the Turtles in Time soundtrack, and it's freaking phenomenal. I listened to probably 3/4 of it, and I didn't skip a song. It was great, and I recommend it to anyone who's a Turtles fan or just like an OST fan. It's so good. So good.
Speaking of OC Remix, there is actually a really great remix of the map music from the original NES Ninja Turtles on OC Remix. It's freaking sweet.
There we go. You know what, guys? Just go visit OC Remix. You know what,
Yes.
OC Remix, we're horning you out today. You're gonna get some visitors because of us.
You're welcome. Does anybody else have anything to add on the Turtles 3 to Turtle 4 bump?
Turtles 4. Sorry, Dean.
No. I was just gonna say that I remember Turtles 4 very fondly, and the thing about Turtles 3, I remember playing it. I don't remember anything else about it. So
That's the thing with it.
yeah.
Or just overpowered it.
And yeah, I mean, you're right. You know, the fights and everything in 4 were so memorable and great. I remember playing that at my friend's house for hours. We didn't even beat it. I was pretty young when that came out, but you know, it was just such a great game. I enjoyed it so much, and that was the thing about 3, because I went back later on. I found the game at a flea market. We bought it, we played it, and I was like, yeah, it was good. Yeah, all right. And now in my advanced age of 25 years old, I can't remember anything about it. So, yeah, I just think the game doesn't have as great staying power as 4 did, or 4 is just emblazoned in my mind as the hallmark Turtles game for now.
Well, I think an important thing to toss in about the whole Turtles thing, especially Turtles in Time, that really makes it stick out is that we all played the original in the arcade.
Yep.
Right? Is there anybody here that hasn't played the arcade version?
Before,
of the original game.
You mean before the NES, or just or the SNES, or just in general never played it?
The first Turtles arcade game.
Okay, because I played it, but I did play the SNES one first, and there was a huge gap in time between that and when I played the arcade.
So not Turtles in Time in arcade, the original Ninja Turtles arcade game.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to play that down at Maury's Pier
Nice.
in Wildwood in New Jersey with I just hours and hours in those arcades down there playing Turtles and The Simpsons and X-Men. Those were the 3.
Oh yeah, that's all great Konami beat 'em ups. I so
my team.
distinctly remember being a huge fan of. I was a huge Turtles fan when I was a kid, and that arcade game, it just looked like the cartoon. It was so bright and colorful, and then you'd go home and I remember seeing in the pages of Nintendo Power that Turtles 2 was going to be a port of the arcade game for NES, and while it was really cool to have that experience at home, it couldn't do it. The NES was completely incapable of displaying those kinds of colors and animation and really making it. While it was a valiant effort, it never really hit the highs that the arcade game did. And you know, even when Turtles 3 came out, when they tried to evolve the formula a little bit and add a few extra moves and things like that, it still paled in comparison to my memories of the arcade game. And that, it's just that first stage with all that fire and, Rocksteady showing up, I'm going to get you, Toidles, and whatever the heck he says. And all that stuff just sticking out in my mind. And then Turtles 4 for Super Nintendo happens. And now, I didn't play the Turtles in Time arcade game until a couple of years later, but the Super Nintendo game comes out and it looks as good as I remember the original arcade game looking, and maybe even a little bit sharper and tighter. And while it sucked that you couldn't play 4 players, it was so good and such a huge leap forward as far as the console Ninja Turtles games are concerned. And I don't think they definitely haven't accomplished that since. I mean, there have been Turtles games since.
Did anybody play the reshelled Turtles
I
in Time?
missed that one.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
Yeah,
You
from what
dodged
I
a bullet.
understand, it's not good.
How do you,
I'm glad I own it, but that's about it.
Not good is putting it lightly.
Yeah.
how do you
Well-
ruin something like that?
there was no love in it. I think they were cashing in on the title.
Yep, let's just make a quick buck.
That's such a shame. That is such a shame. When you see stuff like DuckTales Remastered that's made with just pure unadulterated love for the source material, and then you see something like, because I've never played Reshelled, but I've seen video of it, and it just looks so bland.
They take
And
stuff out in it too, and it's just like, why would you do that? Like they change boss fights and such.
yeah, because I mean, it was based off of the arcade port, right? Our version, right? Not the Super
Yeah.
Nintendo one, which was clearly superior because I think you could unlock the first time I really spent time with Turtles in Time, no pun intended. It was the Turtles 3 Battle Nexus for GameCube and
Mhm.
Xbox and PlayStation 2. You could unlock Turtles in Time if you beat that game, which was a terrible game, but we beat it. I can't remember if it was 2 or 3, but I was at my store that I was working at the time. We powered through it, made it happen so we could play that game. And when we blew through it, I noticed how many differences there were. Like the game is considerably shorter than the Super NES version. The boss fights are all switched around and wacky. And while there are a handful of extra animations in it, which are very cool, it's the Super NES version was just so well put together.
Mhm.
That it's just superior in every conceivable way. And to base a remake on that version instead of the superior version just boggles my mind. I don't understand why somebody would do that.
Yeah, to put the best praise I can put on Turtles in Time is that I have the NES games and I have Turtles in Time. And when I sit down to play games with my kids, they want to watch Turtles in Time. That's the one they want to play. They're 5, and for them it's not about the graphics or like they don't look at it and like, oh, this is 16-bit, daddy, we're used to PS4, what is this garbage. They just, that's the one they want to play. That's the one that has hooked them at that young age, which I think just speaks to just how good that game is. A 5-year-old just watching that game gets sucked right into it the same way we did when we were kids.
Yep.
Very awesome. Well, good choice, Mike.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I guess I'm gonna go next because I believe Dean has a controversial one, which I am really excited to talk about. So let me get mine out of the way. I am going to go say that my favorite example of a sequel vastly improving over its predecessor was Mario Brothers to Super Mario Brothers. Um, Mario Brothers, if anybody's unfamiliar, it was the third Mario game in the arcades after Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. After DK Jr., they did a split where Mario moved off in his own direction, and Donkey Kong got Donkey Kong 3, where they introduced a new protagonist, and Stanley the Bugman sprayed bug spray into Donkey Kong's crotch for a while, and it was very strange. Mario, who had previously been a carpenter in the original Donkey Kong, and then a villain in the second one where he had Donkey Kong locked in a cage and DK Jr. had to try to free him. They gave him a brother, Luigi, and they put him in his now ultimately pointless, but what he's known for, job, plumber. And they were running around the sewers, and these little turtles and crabs and flies would come out of these pipes. And it introduced the mechanic of the primary mechanic of the thing was that you would jump underneath platforms and you would hit the bottom of a platform, knocking whatever character or creature on top of it is upside down, making it defenseless. Then you run over and you kick it and knock it into the water, and defeating all of the enemies is how you defeated a stage. Now, this was an old school arcade game, so there wasn't really an ending to it. It was just play until you run out of lives and see if you can get a high score. But it created this kind of almost narrative characterization thing that Nintendo had become known for since Donkey Kong, by having these bright, colorful characters that were really interesting to look at. And also, like I said before, introducing the character of Luigi, who was at the time still just a palette swap of Mario, but it was 2-player at the same time. And the evolution from Donkey Kong to this, as far as Mario as a character is concerned, Donkey Kong was Mario doing some very basic platforming, mostly jumping over things, and this really took Mario's jumping ability to a crazy new standard, which is what Mario is now known for, is being able to jump like 13 feet into the air with that without a hitch. Um, After that happens, they move on to Super Mario Brothers, and there's still so many similarities, but the expansion from Mario Brothers to Super Mario Brothers is so astronomical, but so basic at the same time. I just thought it was a really fascinating thing to look at, because you still have, the first thing you do in Super Mario Brothers, besides jump over a Goomba, and if you've only played Mario Brothers, you may not necessarily know that you can jump and stomp on that thing, because from the original Mario Brothers, if there's a character that was on the ground directly in front of you, you had to avoid it. And so you walk past it, and then the first thing you do is jump underneath a question block and get a mushroom, and that's where it introduces power ups. And okay, we're in a windstorm. What's going on? Oh,
But everything's okay.
we're back. Okay, sorry, I was just hearing a whole lot of static for a minute.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, it's back.
I don't know who's that coming from.
It might be me then, I guess, but we're okay.
Oh, okay. All right, as long as we're okay.
So 39 minutes in, make an edit.
26 minutes in.
Oh, to the recording. Yeah, we're looking at the call time.
God, guys, get the fuck with it.
Fuck, Dean, God.
Damn.
Listen, you're a doctor. The rest of us, we're not even sexy doctors. We're just regular.
No, I'm pretty ugly.
See, Mike has fucking confirmed this.
You know what? Screw it. I'm leaving this in. This is explicit now. We're going on. Anyway,
Going whole hog. All right. So anyway, back to what I was saying before is, so you're still Mario, but now the screen scrolls instead of being a single locked to a single screen. The screen scrolls to the right, and while retaining a lot of the core elements that made Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers just took it to this extreme. So for most people, that was their first experience with Mario, because I know that was mine. I actually went back to play Mario Brothers after having played Super Mario Brothers, and thought it was a fascinating experience. But it must have been really interesting to have played Mario Brothers first, and then see either on the NES or in the arcades, because there was an arcade version of Super Mario Brothers, show up, and just see how it progressed into this totally different but kind of similar experience. Anybody else have anything to say about it?
I'm the same way. I went back and played Mario Brothers after playing Super Mario Brothers, and my initial reaction to the game was, this is stupid. Why would they do this next? Right? Because what did I know? I didn't know it came out before us. This is the worst thing I've ever played. I hate this game. And it was in an arcade, and I think I just kind of ran to it because I saw Mario on the side of the arcade cabinet. It was just like, oh, I'm gonna play. It's Mario. I love Mario, and just this is dumb, right? And as I grew older, I grew to appreciate it. It's actually a pretty cool game as far as that type of, it's kind of in the same league as Joust, in that kind of never ending, let's just try and get the high score kind of thing. And it's a really well done game. I like it a lot now, but I think you're right. That evolution from, jumping up and hitting the characters from underneath, to taking that, your initial reaction when you play Super Mario Brothers is, there's a question block here, I can jump, I'm going to try and hit it, and oh my God, I'm bigger now. What is that all about? I can break these bricks too? And just this kind of fascinating expansion of that concept.
Yeah, and you could still do, like, if there was a turtle in its shell walking across a platform, you could still punch underneath it and knock him over the same way you could in the original Mario Brothers. But the one thing that I do kind of miss about it, which was the competitive aspect of Mario Brothers, because while I concede that Super Mario Brothers is a vastly superior experience, the original Mario Brothers had that really fun screw with the other person competitive / cooperative thing going on to it, which was kind of lacking in the two-player version of Super Mario Brothers was really pretty lame because it was just watching the other person play until they died, not even finishing a stage. Like if you were really good at the game and you were player one, player two would just be sitting there
Bored.
doing nothing, bored out of their mind
Yeah.
for forever and ever and ever, which I did to my sister on more than one occasion. But yeah, it was man, I absolutely love the original Mario Brothers in the arcade. I love the sound of it. Just the collecting of the coins is another connective tissue between Mario and Super Mario. Was you would collect coins in that one, and coins maintained their appearance in Super Mario Brothers as well. But just all the sounds and the neat little animations, like the turtle. You knock a turtle upside down, you leave it there long enough, he jumps out of his shell, kicks it, and then crawls back inside. And little things like that, which didn't really make much of a reappearance until Super Mario World. Seeing the little turtles in their white underwear getting knocked out of their shells. But yeah,
Well,
that was. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. One of the more iconic items from Mario is that POW block, right?
That's true.
If
the
I'm
POW
not
block,
mistaken, that POW block doesn't show up again for a while, right?
Well, it's
Mario
Mario
2.
Bros. 2.
Yeah, so I mean, you've got a game in between there, and I know a lot of people that still haven't really ever gotten very far through Super Mario Brothers 2 because it's just so weird and so different.
Because it's Mario's fucking fever dream.
Yes, it is a strange game and not a Mario game. Which we'll talk about that another time.
Another time.
It is, however, my favorite Mario game. So I don't know what that says about me as a person.
I think it says that you're a weirdo, Dan.
Weirdo.
I really, this may be blasphemy on a retro game podcast, but I really don't like Mario games all that much. It's
understandable. I mean, some people just don't like platformers. I mean, even early ones like that. It's hard to. It's not out there or unacceptable to say you don't like Mario. I don't think so. With so many other games available.
And, Dan's a bad person, so there's that.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
Dan. You know what? Just hang up. Hang up on the phone call. I don't want to hear you anymore. God.
Dan, I
that
still
is,
like
no,
you.
that is. Thank you.
All right,
Guys,
gentlemen,
remember to
moving
subscribe to
on.
the podcast if you hate Dan.
Yes, just
There you go,
subscribe to the
yes.
podcast if you hate Dan. Gentlemen,
Wait,
moving
are
on.
we defining-
Well, Chris,
I
I
mean-
just do want to say. Oh, good, Dan, go ahead. And after you, I want to say something.
Sorry, no,
Oh,
I was
yeah.
just going to say, can I be the heel? I'm fine with that. I'll be the bad guy. That's
Totally.
cool. Awesome.
Are the bad guy.
Awesome.
Yeah, Mike,
Stuff.
what you got?
In Super Mario Brothers 3, wasn't there like the option to play the original Mario Brothers?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there was.
That was my first time ever playing it. Since I had two older brothers, that was I was lucky enough to be able to get a lot of the stuff that came out way before me since I'm like 26. But like I was playing Mario Bros. 3, I'm like, what is this option? This is nowhere near like Super Mario Bros. 3. I don't like this. And then I go back later on. I'm like, okay, I can see myself getting into this.
And not only that, but there was also the Super Mario Advance games had a whole other. Was it all 4 Super Mario Advance games had the option of playing this kind of updated version of Mario Brothers that had like background animations and music, and it could go up to 4 players, which was really neat. And I love that stuff. That's fantastic. But really, the Mario Brothers to Super Mario Brothers is one of the biggest leaps, and probably one of the most important leaps forward that I think the game industry has ever seen. Really, just a huge one. But as I said before, moving on, Dr. Dean, what do you have for us this evening?
Oh man, I'm gonna get so much shit for this, but let's go ahead. Okay, so I can argue this both ways, but I figured the harder way to do this is to argue the original Banjo-Kazooie compared to Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts being superior.
Well, I'm going to have to throw a wrench in there, because it's got to be a sequel of one to the next. So you got to argue Banjo-Tooie to Nuts and Bolts.
Like I said, threw a wrench in there.
No,
Nuts and
no,
bolts.
no. I'll tell you, no.
Nuts and Bolts.
Yeah,
I'll do it.
that was clever. You're fuck.
We're bad people.
I'm ready for the dad jokes, man. There.
Nice.
All right, remind me to insert a thing there. All right, but yeah, let me get on with this. So everybody remembers the original Banjo-Kazooie games, right? Collectathon?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. When they went to Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, there was a huge gap in between, and there were a lot of failed projects and ideas that never really materialized just because Rare was in a transitional phase on that time, going from a third-party Nintendo developer to I believe it's still strictly third-party Microsoft, correct? Or that would be second party.
Yes, this was after the acquisition, so they were a second party for Microsoft.
Okay, all right. So Banjo-Kazooie got thrown on the back burner for a really long time, and I guess they kind of sort of had this idea to put Banjo-Kazooie back into a game, but they went about it very, very radically different than what Banjo-Kazooie or Banjo-Tooie was. And that's, they threw in this, oh god, this is going to be incredibly difficult to explain for anyone who hasn't played it, but the core of the game, I guess, was you still had, like, objectives to do, like, I gotta get a puzzle piece from so-and-so, slide down the canyon and beat someone in a race, and all that stuff. But you had to do it in a vehicle that you made. Now, this is the part that really got to me and really got me into this game and excited for it, because you had unlimited potential to make whatever you wanted for the most part as far as vehicles went in the game. You unlocked all kinds of different parts and everything. You could make a boat, a helicopter, a huge truck monster, a car, something fast, something slow, but you can get up hills better, all kinds of different ideas. And that changed the way you approach the game, because there was no longer one set way to do anything. There was about, I guess, unlimited set ways, because it was really limited to your imagination. So whatever you did reflected you in a very creative way, and that got me into the game so much so that I actually beat it in I think like 2 weeks, which is very fast for me, because I have this problem where I get into a game and I get bored incredibly quickly, and it'll take me a long time and a lot of focus to really beat the game quickly. This was one of those exceptions where I was just able to hop in and really get into it and really beat it. And to me, that's why the game was better, was because you had a lot more potential to do things that weren't necessarily, I guess, normal at the time for a collectathon or a platform or whatever you want to call it. A lot of people are going to trash the game because it's not what they were expecting, and definitely not the norm for Banjo-Kazooie. But I think it was a fresh idea and a good look at the game. Even the reviewers were pretty generous with the reviews on it. I believe it was mostly like 8.5s across the board. So, I mean, if anybody has any questions or anything in our little group here, by all means, fire away.
I personally never played Nuts and Bolts, and I played Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie, but I wasn't like a huge fan of it. Like, a lot of people, like, it has a huge following, both those games. And all I remember is a bunch of my friends, like, hated Nuts and Bolts when it came out. I didn't even give it a shot.
Yeah.
So I don't know much about it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's totally different from what anyone was expecting. It had a newer look to it, and I guess it threw a lot of, fans of the game off, because, to be honest, they really could have thrown anyone in the game. Like, Banjo and Kazooie didn't have to be in it, but I was happy to see them all the same. Like, it made me incredibly happy to see them, because they're some of my favorite memorable characters from the N64 era, and to see them back on a system again was probably one of my best memories on the Xbox 360, regardless of what game it was in.
And was there any real connective tissue with the whole what really connects Nuts and Bolts to Banjo-Tooie? I mean, was there?
Yeah, what happens is, I mean, Gruntilda comes back in Banjo-Tooie. You end up beating her again, and she's dead this time. However, in
Spoilers.
Well,
Shit. I was going to say, I've never played any of the Banjo games, and now I'm not going to. Thanks.
Yeah,
Dean.
the bad guy dies at the
Oh.
end of the game. I'm sorry I spoiled that for you. My bad.
Seriously, spoiler warnings next time.
I'll tell you what. I'll put some big sirens like right before we get into this that say spoilers. No problem. I got this.
Please do.
Okay. All right.
Please do.
Okay.
Ugh.
But yeah. Let me get back into this. She ends up coming back in the third one, and I'm pretty sure it's something ridiculous, like she's about to literally destroy all of existence, and these weird like gods or something like kind of throw them into another universe or something like that to settle their differences. And this is where it gets a little nutty story-wise, because it's like, we'll settle this in a race. And I'm just like, oh, boy. But aside from that, like, the characters and everything are cool. Everybody comes back again. Mumbo Jumbo's there. Bottles is there. Everyone is there for the most part. Banjo's sister, you know. And I liked it. There is some connective tissue. I'm sure I probably butchered the story because I played it when it first came out, and that's probably going on 4 or 5 years now, if I'm not mistaken. So my memory's a little hazy about what goes on. But I remember the last level pretty well because your car has to be equipped with like every way, shape, and form of transportation possible to win the match, which is pretty cool. You get into a whole big battle at the end and whatnot. It's a great, huge last battle to top off the game, and like I said, I liked it. You know, it was good. I wish more people would give it a chance.
Interesting.
Yeah, that to me actually sounds like a relatively interesting gameplay mechanic. Like I said, I actually really never have played Banjo-Kazooie or Banjo-Tooie, 'cause by the time they came out, they came out in like what, 2000, 2001, something like that, I think.
Yeah, I mean the game was nuts and bolts was really meta with itself as well. Like when the game starts, Banjo and Kazooie are like fat and out of shape and whatnot.
That's the only thing I saw about the game.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of people got mad about that too, that they were kind of making fun of themselves and whatnot. But I mean, it's nice. It's cool to make fun of yourselves. You know, it's cool to have a sense of humor about the game. But I don't know. Maybe fans took it the wrong way. And please, if you got anything to say about this, that I suck, that Dan sucks, that you hate Dan, that Dan's an idiot. I'm sorry, Dan's not really an idiot. But yeah, anything about the game, you know, please shoot us an email. Let us know. You know, I'm more than looking forward to hearing any remarks about this because I'm sure I'm probably one of the only people who speaks for nuts and bolts and not against it.
Well, it's you know, you've definitely piqued my interest on it. I have to say that I'm happy to see what was left of Rare taking some kind of chance in something that is interesting, because the game always looked interesting. I did like the art style that they went with for it, that seemed a little bit less generic, which was one of the things that always turned me off to the original Banjo games. Was I didn't really like the way they looked, but I didn't like the way a lot of Nintendo 64 games looked, and 64 era is pretty ugly in my opinion.
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough.
Yeah, the art direction was pretty cool in there, and I never really mind it when they take some sort of really drastic change to sequels, because there's nothing stopping the original games still exist, and if they don't try something new, I mean, it may not always work the way you want it to, and I think that the big backlash against Nuts and Bolts was that people didn't feel like it felt like a Banjo-Kazooie game. Like they wanted to be those two characters running and jumping and collecting millions upon millions of trinkets, and instead using those trinkets to kind of sort of build things to get around. I think it's a neat wrinkle, and you know, you've piqued my interest. I would be willing to give this one a shot.
To anyone curious, I'd say check it out. If you got an Xbox 360, the game you could probably buy it for literally $2. It's very easy to come by. It was included with a lot of holiday releases and stuff. I think it was included in a bunch of like duo packs and everything. So it's incredibly easy to come by. I would say pick one up, try it out. It's a cool game. Definitely worth some time spent in it, especially if you just want to see the Banjo and Kazooie characters in action again, and not so much care about what sort of gameplay they're in, because the gameplay's good, but if you're like a hardcore purist, yeah, I could see why you're probably mad.
Also, if you get it on 360, I believe you can download Banjo, Kazooie, and Tooie off their live.
Correct, but that's if you buy it brand new. I don't know if you're going to be able to find one that's brand new anymore.
From what I was told, there's unlockables throughout all three. If you if you beat one, there's stuff that unlocks in Tooie and all that.
Really?
Okay,
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I remember when I first got the Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, that was one of the reasons why I got it so quickly at release, because it was a $50, $60 game. It wasn't cheap, was because it came with Banjo-Kazooie, the original, on the Xbox 360 with achievements. So I was like, I need it. I gotta have it. And it was totally worth it, because it getting to play one of my favorite games on the Xbox 360 on my big screen television, all kind of not HD, but it was what do you call that when it's full screen but it's fit for the screen? What the hell do they call that?
Upscaled.
Yeah, upscaled. Thank you. It
Yep.
was upscaled for that. It was great. I really did enjoy playing even through that again too. And I did that after I beat Nuts and Bolts. That wasn't like I bought the game just to get Banjo-Kazooie. I beat Nuts and Bolts first, and then I went back and played Banjo-Kazooie.
Well, gentlemen, that was pretty fascinating stuff. And if anybody listening has anything to say, please let us know. And that, I believe, is going to wrap us up for this evening. This is a rousing conversation. I had fun. I hope you did too. Please rate us on iTunes. If you get this through this podcast through iTunes, go there, take a couple of minutes, write a review for us. That's how more people can find us. And the more people find us, the more people will send in listener mail, the more super fun topics that we will get to discuss. And speaking of listener mail, if you have anything to say to us about how much you think Mike sounds like he's talking through a cardboard box, how much you hate Dan for being ugly, or how much you think Dean is an idiot for liking Nuts and Bolts for Xbox 360, or how much you think my topic was boring, because really, who doesn't love Super Mario Brothers? Please send your listener mail to Geek Life Site, that's G33K Life Site @gmail.com, and just say that you wanted to ask the folks at Stone Age Gamer some questions, include Stone Age Gamer in the topic so we know what you're talking about, and that would be super helpful. We got a couple of things to plug. Dean, you've got some stuff that you wanted to plug?
Yeah, we do another podcast on our website, Geek Life. If you just search the Geek Philosophers, that's G33K space Philosophers, you can check that out. We talk about all kinds of stuff, video games, comics, movies, and everything. We just did one recently about Superman that'll be up the same time this podcast is up. And then we'll have one up actually right after that, probably a day or two after, about Godzilla. We'll be talking about Godzilla and Friends, and I'm really looking forward to that because I fucking love Godzilla. But yeah, check us out.
How can you not love Godzilla?
Exactly.
Who doesn't?
And, yeah, I know you guys are gonna listen to it because you guys love Godzilla, and
No, I'm not.
And you know what, Dan? Jesus. Thanks. But anyway, you guys can check it out on iTunes or on our website. Everything's available through both of those mediums. And if you have any questions, it's the same email too. And yeah, that's really about it. I would love for you guys to listen to the Geek Philosophers podcast because we do cover some really cool stuff.
Excellent. Dan, do you have anything to plug?
Yeah, sure. Why not? I like to drink beer, and I figured I would start reviewing them in a podcast form, and I decided let's include it as the Geek Life family of podcasts, along with the Stone Age Gamer and the Geek Philosophers. You can check out the Brew Review Show. I've got a bunch of episodes in the can, no pun intended, because I'm really not a big fan of beer out of cans because, I get snobby about this stuff. But yeah, just beers that I find, beers that I drink, craft beer. I'm certainly not going to review like Michelob Ultra and Natty Ice and whatnot, but some interesting stuff that I run across here in my bottle shops here in Texas They're only about 10 minutes long. So if you're interested in expanding your horizons as far as beer drinking is concerned, there are so many great options out there. There's so much delicious beer for you to drink. I'm going to find them and talk about them. So yeah, give that a shot, and same thing. If you have questions about it, if you would like to send me beer, that would be awesome. Go ahead, drop a line at the geeklifesite.com, put Brew Review Show in the subject header, and we can handle it from there. And if you're going to leave a review, make sure it's a 5-star review, because if it's anything, just keep your opinion to yourself. But 5 stars, share those with the world. That's great.
Well, Dan, so you're not going to be reviewing Milwaukee's Best?
I've thought about, I actually have thought about, maybe I will do a show where I will sit down with a bunch of brown baggers and, drink like the very first thing that I ever drank, which was a 40 of Old English, because I'm from the streets, son. That is how I do.
That should definitely be like a side note podcast. That would be fantastic.
Drink and review like Bud Light, and see, that's the problem though. If I start doing that, then I have to drink like Lime-A-Rita and the Bud Light or the Budweiser and tomato juice thing that 7-Eleven carries in Texas, and I can't do it. I value my life. I'll do it for money, but
because
I am sorry, did you just become a prostitute?
I value my life, not my dignity.
Yeah, no, God, really? Dignity? Please.
Speaking of dignity, Mike, do you have anything to plug?
No, not really, not today.
Nope.
Fantastic. And you guys can find me in Nintendo Force Magazine. It's an honest-to-goodness print magazine that is dedicated to the life and legacy of all things Nintendo. I write a regular column in there called Peripheral Vision, wherein I look at old Nintendo peripherals and talk about them in extraordinarily long format. My first issue was the previous issue, issue 8. Issue 9 will be on the shelves soon, where I'm talking about the Game Boy Player and comparing it to the current state of Game Boy Advance games being on the Wii U Virtual Console and which one is better. So that's going to be it for us. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or on our great site, geeklife.com. That's G33KLife.com. And thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
See you guys. Have a good one.
Later.
Good one.